Hey, what's going on? My name is Bim, and this is the successor to one of the best, if not the best, third-party Nintendo Switch / PC controllers that has come out recently. This is the 8bitDo Pro 2 Bluetooth controller. It used to be called the SN30 Pro Plus, but I'm guessing they're getting rid of the SN30 to just probably distance themselves from Nintendo branding. Let's take a look at this guy. There's a little bit of a nick, and the packaging is premium as always, like most 8-bit all 8bitDo products. The packaging is very good. So there was a sleeve, you saw me remove it, and then it comes in this nice solid box, and then you see it in all its glory. You just lift up the little plastic. Usually there's a plastic sticker that comes to protect the buttons, but I've since removed that. And then you've got the controller, and all it really comes with is a cable and your manual. So that's all you need. All right, let's compare it with the original, the 8bitDo SN30 Pro Plus. So there were a few things that I didn't like about the SN30 Pro Plus. Primarily, it would be that the select and start button is a little askew to the left. Like, you can see it, right? Like, so it should be smack dab in the middle between these two right here, but it's a little skewed to the left. Not a big deal usually when you're playing, but it kind of gets annoying to look at. Another would be the pattern of the positioning of the face buttons. So if you measure this button, the distance between this button and this button, you're gonna get like 1 cm, and between this button and this button is 1.5 cm. So it doesn't create like a perfect diamond. When you're playing, you do notice it. It does take some getting used to. It's not difficult to get used to it, but it's still noticeable. It creates like a rhomboid pattern, while on the Pro 2, you see that the select and start smack dab in the middle, and then the face buttons create now like a perfect diamond. They are now equidistant from each other, and that's great. Another thing I didn't like about the SN30 Pro Plus is that when you're connecting it from device to device, you're gonna need to memorize a pattern or a combination rather of buttons start plus one of these face buttons to connect it to a specific device. And it does say it in the manual. I think it's in the box, you can read it, and they're just like 4 buttons, so you can memorize it over time, but it's still a bit of a hassle. With the Pro 2, they got rid of all that and instead just have a selector switch, which is amazing. And the selector switch goes SADX, SADX, S for switch, A for Apple, D for, well, technically direct input, which is what you use for Android, but just like think of D as droid, and X for X input for PC. Yeah, so all you have to do now is pick and then press start, and it should pair. Speaking of pairing, I had no issues pairing it to the Switch, pairing it to like a mobile phone, and pairing it to PC. So just for PC, you just go press start, turns on, go into your like Bluetooth settings, and you'll find it and you'll pair it. With the Switch, you go into change grip order like you do with any other third-party controller, and you find it there. With an Android, I didn't have an Apple device to test it on, but with Android, you go into the Bluetooth settings, and it's super easy. No issues. But if you do need to go into a pairing state, this is the pairing button. So all you have to do is press and hold that, and then the controller goes into like a pairing mode. Another great difference between the SN30 Pro Plus and the Pro 2 is now, so it's now connected to my PC, which is like the other room, but now switching profiles is as easy as pressing a button. So there are 3 preloaded profiles: Profile 1, Profile 2, Profile 3, and just default no profile. With each profile, you are able to select and set a number of things. Later I'll get into the software a lot more because there's a lot to talk about. So I wanted to talk about a little bit of the very few negatives I found with the controller. Number one, and primary of which, would be the plastic quality on the D-pad. So the plastic quality on the D-pad, while not terrible, feels a lot worse than maybe the rest of the body. So this is like a nice matte, high quality premium plastic. This is nice glossy premium plastic. This nice rubber and everything. When it comes to the D-pad, it feels a little cheap. You know, like a toy from China or something. It's kind of like the grainy type of plastic. That's what they used for this. It's a hard plastic with no give. It feels okay when you're playing with it, but you do notice how grainy it is, especially when you compare it to the SN30 Pro Plus, where the D-pad is a lot more premium feeling. It's actually the same plastic, I think, as the buttons. With the Pro 2, not the same plastic. My other tiny complaint would be about these two buttons, but that really only matters if you're using macros. In normal use, this wouldn't be too much of a problem, because like if you're using it on a Nintendo Switch, one of them is screenshot, the other is home. I think, at least I think that's how it goes. I forget which one does what, but you don't press them often. But if you are using macros and you're cheating, then you kind of have to find them easily. The thing is, they are textured, so you can kind of glide your hand and find them. But if they were raised just a little bit more, it would be easier to just find them and press them. But you know, don't cheat, don't do that. But anyway, since we're on the topic, let's talk about the software. Okay, so software is probably what makes the 8bitDo Pro 2 one of the best, if not the best, third-party controllers for the Switch and the PC, especially given the $50 price point. The software lets you do things that most premium controllers just dream of. So first is being able to map the buttons. Oh, also, before I get into that, you don't need a PC. To be able to map buttons and use the software, you don't need a PC. All you need is your phone. You can just download the 8bitDo app on your phone, pair it with your controller, and you could essentially do the exact same things. I don't want to pair it, but like you could do the exact same things you could do on a PC on your phone, and it is easy to use and it is seamless. Mapping buttons, so you can map any button to any other button, which doesn't see a lot of use maybe when it comes to like mainstream conventional gaming. But if you have an injury, or if you are have a disability of some kind, then this would allow you to be able to play a little bit more comfortably by mapping probably a couple face buttons to your back buttons here, and which might allow you to play a little bit better, a little bit more comfortably, and that's always a good thing. Adjusting the sensitivity of your sticks, like I think by default the sensitivity is already great. I think the sensitivity and the aiming prowess of the controller is up there with the DualShock 4 and the Xbox Series X controllers. I think it's just phenomenal just by default. But if you wanted to adjust it, you can adjust it so that you can make the dead zone bigger for, you know, finer shot adjustments, or you can make the maximum smaller. So the smallest tap would bring it from 0 to 100. You could also change the sensitivity of the rumble, but you know, who the hell does that? You could also change the sensitivity of the triggers. By default, the triggers are actually already super good, right? The travel isn't long. That's all the travel, and that's perfect. But if you wanted to make it like a hair trigger, so if you're playing like a shooter and you want to be able to just kind of rapidly tap it without having to fully commit to the whole length of the trigger, you can do that, which is, you know, customization well above and beyond a lot of the top tier, very expensive controllers that are out there on the market. But what I think really sets this apart are the macros. But again, macros, especially with fighting games, especially if you're doing ranked, is cheating. Don't do it. You're cheating yourself, man. But with that said, if you want to do it, you can do it with this controller. So like I said, this button and this button on PC have no default bindings. Neither do the back paddles. So that means you have 4 buttons you can map to a macro. So on Tekken, that's actually my profile 1. Not that I use it online. Right? I mean, I did for testing, but just testing. I didn't take it to ranked or anything. But what I did was I mapped these two face buttons to Korean backdash, or well, backdash cancel. I don't know if you can call it a perfect Korean backdash. It looks like it, but I mapped it to back, neutral, down back, back, down back. So the way I use it is I press it twice, very fast. Oh, also if you're using macros, that button lights up. And when I was testing latency, I used this light to be able to tell me when frame 0 was, which is a lot more accurate than when I would just look at the button depressing. Anywho, more on that later. Back, down, back. So the backdash here. So like I said earlier, like it would be nice if they were raised a little bit, so I could just find them easier to be able to do the backdash. So quick double tap gives you a backdash, and then you find your rhythm, and it gives you very fast, very consistent Korean backdash. I did the same for this one on the other side, and for the back paddles, I put in an electric. And at first what I did was I put in the whole command: forward, neutral, 0.02 seconds, down, down, forward 2. But the problem with that is, if you're doing it that way, the distance that your electric goes will be the same every single time. Not only does it look like you're obviously cheating, it makes whiff punishing a little harder because you don't get to control the distance that your character moves forward. So what I did was I removed forward and I only kept the down, down, forward 2, because the hardest part of an electric is down, down, forward. The down, forward 2 and the 2 pressing it on the same frame. That's the hardest part. But with this, it will be guaranteed to be on the same frame every single time on the same frame. But yeah, so that's essentially the power of the ultimate software. In terms of latency, so the way I tested it was using the macro because of the light, right? And I found, what I did was I shot it at 240 frames per second, and I found that at 240 frames per second, the macro, well, I guess this is sort of a negative in a way, but more often than not, you would get it 12 frames. The first animation, this is on Tekken 7 at least. I think if you do it on Street Fighter, it's a little shorter, but on Tekken, which is what I tested, the first frame of animation happens on frame 12 frames after pressing the button at 240 frames per second. I don't know how that translates to 60 frames, but very quick, right? So there's barely any delay, except sometimes the macro does get delayed. So the longest delay I found on the macro was around 19 frames, but 19 frames versus 12 frames at 240 frames per second is nothing. It is nothing. Anyway, it's very fast, very little latency, amazing software, amazing comfort, really nice to look at, easy to pair. So, you know, this is one of the best, if not the best, third-party controllers at this price point, and even compared to more expensive controllers. So if you're looking for something within like $50-$60 that you could use for your Switch and the PC, this is it. This is it. I'm not recommending any other controller. This is it. But don't cheat. Cheating is bad. All right, this has been BIM. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.
K